Okay.
We're good.
Welcome, everyone. Especially welcome to you, Rabbi Ariella Rosen, my friend Ariella, who's joining us at CBI in June as our Director of Youth and Family Education and Engagement. And we're so excited to have you. And Ariella and I are both very happy to have these informal conversations that we can share with the community to get a sense of what you're interested in, Ariella, and how we're going to begin our work together. But first, let's talk a little bit about you, and let's talk about the most important development in your life recently. You just got married, Mazel Tov. Tell us all about the wedding, tell us all about your partner, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. I guess before I get there, I just want to say I'm also very, very excited to be joining all of you really soon. So we got married this past October. We Jewishly married this past, sorry?
Who's the we?
Oh, the we is me and Becca Walker, Rabbi Becca Walker, who is my wife. Also a conservative movement ordained rabbi. She went to the Ziegler School in Los Angeles, but we actually knew each other as undergrads at Columbia and JTS in New York, and reconnected at a this is like very niche, but an early career women rabbis retreat run by the Rabbinical Assembly at Isabella Friedman, not too far from CBI. A few years ago. And so we got married in October. It was our Jewish wedding. We actually had gotten civilly married about a year and a half before that, in part because of immigration issues and wanting to be in the same place in Toronto. But we got married at Camp Ramah, New England, again, pretty close to CBI. It's where I grew up going to camp. So it felt very special to be able to do it there, and also great to just know people who would help, we knew we could work with to help make it special. And it was really fun. It was really, we were navigating around all of the COVID concerns, but we were still able to have like a really special weekend and celebration with a lot of our family and friends. Unfortunately, because of COVID, not everyone could make it, but we still had a really nice time. And Becca's really excited to be coming to the community as well. She's from Boston. I grew up in West Hartford. So Northampton's sort of like a nice midpoint for us for being close to our families. So we're very excited to be back in New England. And yeah.
I can just imagine, and I've been to some, weddings of two rabbis, and it's just like over the top simcha and over the top learning. And it's just incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, I think we had like 20 rabbis at the wedding also, just because we went to different rabbinical schools. So we had different friends and family members who were in attendance. And it was a lot of fun, and our friends really helped make it feel special. And there was a lot of singing and a lot of dancing throughout the weekend. And I think that something that felt special is, this is sort of from a privileged place of really understanding the intricacies of Jewish weddings, being able to really plan out together with the rabbis involved in helping to marry us, something that felt very intentional and authentic, and a nice balance of being a tribute to traditional Jewish approaches to weddings, and also the fact that we're a queer couple and wanting to honor that and see that reflected in what we did as well. So yeah.
Talk to me about that, because people may not realize that there's a real palette of liturgy to choose from now, and even within just the conservative movement, right? Never mind going outside of that. Can I ask how you and Becca approached the wedding ceremony, and what you looked at, and what you amended or changed or stuff like that?
Absolutely. So this ended up being a project that I took on with my father a little bit. My father is also a rabbi. He played a part in the wedding, though the rabbi that took the primary role was a mutual friend of both mine and Becca's, who's also a queer rabbi. But we went through not all, but like a lot of the different options for Jewish queer weddings, ranging from some that try to really adhere to traditional structures, to ones who, to models that like played a little bit more freely. And my father and I studied them together, which was a nice, just meaningful project for us to do, the two of us. And then I would bring our learning back to Becca, and we would talk them through together. And ultimately what we landed on, which feels funny because we did sort of go on this longer journey, was actually the liturgy that the conservative movement put out for queer Jewish weddings. So mostly because we felt like both comfortable and connected to the sort of the halachic, the Jewish legal decisions that were made along the way, and also just felt like the liturgy was really beautiful. Like we felt very moved by the language that was chosen for it as well. And so we felt like it just was a good reflection of us. Even after looking at all of these different options, we sort of came back to what for us is a home base. So,
yeah. I've often said about that, it's so beautiful that I like it better than the original, and
it's definitely, sorry, I was just saying it's definitely made me think differently about how I approach straight weddings now for when I officiate. So
yeah, when that liturgy was first published, I don't know when it was, like 2012, 2013 or something like that. I brought up for discussion on Shabbat morning and raised the question, well, at the time it was called Liturgy for Same-Sex Weddings. That's what they called it. And of course now we have a different nomenclature, but I asked people in the community, what do you think if this became the universal liturgy? And the overwhelming feeling was that people should have the opportunity to learn about it and check it out and decide. I want to say more about that because there's a phrase that people use. They talk about queering the tradition, and that can mean a lot of things. I want to come back to that. But you mentioned Camp Ramah, and you mentioned that you and Becca went to the joint program. Is Becca a Camp Ramah person as well?
No, she's a Jewish camp person, but she grew up in the Reform movement in her sort of formative years, and she went to other New England Jewish camps. I think she went to Tevye for a little while, and then worked at a couple of the Reform movement camps like Kutz and Coleman down in Georgia, and she's been to a few different kinds of camps. So she definitely has. I don't know. She says that I love camp a lot more than she does, but she's definitely enjoyed and learned a lot and gained a lot from those experiences.
A person may leave camp, especially Jewish camp, but Jewish camp never leaves you. I want to come back to something there because there are some powerful threads here about your own Jewish upbringing. You mentioned your father, Rabbi Jim Rosen, who's a longtime, very esteemed colleague in our movement. You went to Camp Ramah. Did you go to Camp Ramah?
Yeah, I did. I attended and worked. Yeah.
You attended Camp Ramah. You worked at Camp Ramah. You went to the joint program, JTS, and
in Columbia.
Which is a 5-year undergrad program where you get 2 BAs, one from Columbia and one from the Jewish Theological Seminary. Tell us about your Jewish education and just kind of like what, how you grew up, the role that Judaism had in your earlier life, how it sounds like it propelled you through to young adulthood.
Yeah, I definitely had a very quote unquote insider experience of growing up Jewishly, because I grew up as a rabbi's kid, and my mother is a Jewish educator. She taught at the Schechter School in West Hartford, and which I attended as well. So I definitely felt like my life was very saturated with sort of organizational Judaism, which worked really well for me. And I know, in different combinations, some of these things work better for some people than others, but for me, it was a good combination in terms of feeling like I was learning and sort of growing into myself Jewishly and growing into myself as a human being. So I was pretty involved in all these things. I was also active in USY, the youth group in middle school and high school. And so it was just very much a part of my life. And something that I appreciate about my parents was that they still tried to give me moments where I could think about it as optional in a sense. I did go to public high school, which was a choice that I made. They often, as soon as I was old enough to stay home by myself, they would give me the choice of not going to Shabbat services, which most of the time I chose to go because I wanted to hang out with my friends. But I think I appreciated them wanting me to feel like I was choosing it, and that they weren't just imposing it on me. And as soon as I was old enough to be able to feel like I was making those choices. And I would also say that something that has been really important learning for me, I'd say mostly in the past decade or so, has been how to make sure that I can continue to draw on that sort of very insidery experience I had growing up in terms of having access to pretty high level Jewish education, both at home and in schools, and having access to that as a young adult as well. But it's been some of my more recent learning has been to make sure I learn how to like apply that to a broader spectrum of experiences and not just sort of assume the same level of knowledge or background or anything like that when I'm in community with other people. And that's been really important for me. And also to remember that just because I'm coming in with a certain type of learning doesn't mean that I actually know more than anybody else in that space. So
That's interesting. What do you mean by that? Because you say you come in with more learning, but that doesn't mean you know more. What do you mean by that?
I think what I mean by that is that like learning, I think of learning as a very collaborative experience. Even if I'm the one technically in a teaching role, it doesn't mean that the direction is me giving information to you. I want, for me, the best experiences feel like there is a back and forth happening. And I don't have the same experiences as everybody else in the room, and they don't have the same experiences as each other. And if we are bringing our whole selves into the experience, it means that you're going to say something that I've never thought about before. And just because maybe I have had a chance to study more Hebrew than somebody else doesn't mean that I actually have better answers for hopefully the learning that's happening. So this is a very particular kind of example, but my first position out of rabbinical school as an assistant rabbi at a synagogue in the Philadelphia area. And we periodically taught lunch and learns downtown at a law firm. And so I would teach things related to Jewish law to a room full of lawyers. And like, those were some of the most humbling experiences I've ever had, because I'd walk out of there being like, I thought I understood this, but I think I don't actually understand it at all anymore. So, yeah.
But that's kind of cool. You get into a learning situation where you're coming in as the teacher, and you go out realizing that what you thought you understood, you didn't.
Yeah, which is like the best, because I want to feel like I'm continuing to learn also, and I think it's really exciting when somebody brings an insight that feels really new. Like that's sort of how Jewish learning works. Like that's how we've been doing it for centuries. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know if Rabbi Bill Lebo was the dean of the rabbinical school when you were there, but
not the dean, but he was around.
He was around. So he was my dean, and he loved the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot, which, this is not in heaven. If you pick up our Siddur, this is for the people back home. If you pick up our prayer book in the synagogue and you turn to the back, you'll find Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors. Or if you go on Sefaria and click in the search engine, you'll find it. And in the last chapter, there's this famous passage about all the different attributes through which Torah learning is acquired. And it speaks of Pilpul Chaverim, the back and forth between people who are studying together, and Dikduk Chaverim, the way in which people who are really learning together are going to refine each other's understanding. And you alluded to working in, to being an assistant rabbi in Philadelphia, but you've also served in other contexts. You were at the Jewish Theological Seminary. You were director of admissions. Is that right? Or rabbinical?
Yeah, for the rabbinical and cantorial programs.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were the gatekeeper, or one of the gatekeepers of people who wanted to be rabbis and cantors. You've just finished a position at Hillel in Toronto, and you've worked at camp more summers than probably count at this point. And we met at Camp at Ramat Darom at Camp Yofi, probably about 10 years ago or something like that. That's a lot of really varied professional experience, right? Where you've been a rabbi and a teacher in all these different contexts. Having seen what you've seen and done what you've done, and now here you're coming to our community. We're so fortunate to have you. What are some things you're passionate about? Not just sort of in a professional role, but just passionate about in Jewish life and in the work that you want to do as Rabbi Ariella Rosen?
I think this is coming first to mind because I just spent a semester like really focused on this in some of my Hillel teaching, but sort of the difference between being a learner and a student. And this applies a little bit more directly to college students or people who sort of see going to school as the primary thing that they do with their time. But there's something very different about learning how to be a learner and what it means to sort of have this mindset around being curious and asking questions, which also like it's almost Pesach at the time that we're talking right now. So Passover. So it's a time for being curious and asking questions. So I'd say that one of the things that I have really enjoyed, especially more recently, is helping people cultivate that sort of mindset and separate that out from what does it mean to go to school or to think about, what I do primarily during the day as acquiring knowledge, because like we just talked about, learning is different in the way that it can be done best. Learning is different than just acquiring knowledge. I've also, I think, especially these days, been really thinking hard about Jewish joy and what does it mean to lean into the things that are part of what it means to be Jewish and part of Jewish community that involve expressing gratitude and being unashamed to be expressing joy and happiness and celebration, and knowing that is like healthy and generative and regenerative and really an important part of what it means to move through the world and move through the year. And I don't know, I think like in some ways my answer to this question would have been very different a couple of years ago when it was a lot, I just spent the last 2 years pretty rarely going to Shabbat services and having access to, regular rhythms of Jewish life outside of my own work. In part because the COVID restrictions and the way things have been going in Canada have been a little bit more intensive than in a lot of parts of the US. So in some ways it's been a lot. I've also been thinking a lot more about what it means to bring Judaism home. And yes, like it's so good to be together, and it's really important to make sure we come together as a community, but also there's so many pieces of what it means to be Jewish that are meant to happen around our tables and in our homes and in our like home units of the people that we live with. And so what does it mean to help all of us feel empowered to feel excited by those pieces and not just think of them as substitutes for when we can actually be together?
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, we will have so much to talk about. Before we end this part of the conversation, 3 quick takes.
Okay.
Favorite book?
I can't, that's not a quick take for me.
No, give us 2 outside the Babylonian Talmud and the Torah.
That's not a quick take for me. I have to think.
No? Favorite book that you read most recently by your own choice?
I've read a couple of Hank Green novels recently that I've actually really enjoyed. He's also a big YouTube and TikTok personality. He's written some really interesting science fiction, which I'm not typically into, but I've really enjoyed. So
okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Are you into any sports teams?
Yes. Yeah.
Ooh,
huge baseball fan. I feel like this is not controversial, but like confusing to people. I'm a huge Minnesota Twins fan. My father's from Minneapolis and I was raised on his sports teams. So
Boog Powell, Kirby Puckett, Frank Viola, any other favorite Minnesota Twins?
Ken Herbeck, Tony Oliva.
Wow.
Mauer, Joe Mauer, the catcher, fairly recently. Yeah, there's some good ones out there.
That's great. I'm a Mets fan. We'll have a lot to talk about.
All right, we can talk about that.
Yeah, and favorite movies.
Favorite movies. Well, this is appropriate to talking about sports just now. A League of Their Own is a movie that I love.
There's no crying in baseball.
Yeah, big fan of also Disney kids sports movies. Always make me happy.
Rookie. You ever see The Rookie?
Yeah. Dennis Quaid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Breaking Away?
No.
I
don't think so.
When are they going to make a movie about the 2019 U.S. women's soccer team? That's the movie
I would watch that one. I would definitely watch that one.
Oh, that's great. Well, Ariella, such a pleasure. And we'll have a couple more conversations and we'll pick up some of these wonderful themes you've drawn out for us. Thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thank you.